Welcome to the Blue Security Podcast, a weekly podcast for information security defenders, where we bring you discussions on best practices, tools, and implementation for enterprise security. Now, here are your hosts for today's show, Andy Jha and Adam Brewer.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Blue Security Podcast. I'm Andy, your host.
I'm Adam, your co-host.
Adam, I don't know if you saw the news here, but there was some big security news. You know, like all of these different vendors are always consolidating these days. And this was a big one, I thought. Palo Alto announced that they were acquiring CyberArk. And CyberArk is one of the identity security leaders in the space. And Palo Alto is one of the few like really big platform as a security vendors as well. They started in firewalls and they have some EDR. They're pretty good at NDR, SaaS stuff. So they're adding CyberArk into their portfolio for $25 billion. And so if you read Palo's announcement, there were like three different things that they wanted to do from acquiring CyberArk. One was accelerating the platform strategies. Like they're already one of the bigger platform security folks, and then disrupting the legacy IAM market. Not sure how that's going to go, but they have a strategy there. And then securing agentic AI. And so that is really interesting. I would like to dive in at some point and take a look at see what CyberArk has when it comes to agentic AI. They are one of the longest running identity security vendors in this space, but it's also pretty well known that their stuff is fairly legacy as well. There's a lot of infrastructure that goes on with it. You need like professional services in order to like upgrade stuff. I wasn't ever a customer, but I did look at their solution when I was, at an organization, and it seemed pretty complex. But, good for Palo Alto. I think this is good for them to add to their portfolio. Interesting enough, both CyberArk and Palo Alto stock went down after the announcement. I don't know, like usually
quite significantly.
Yeah, usually I think like when these things are announced, like, you get them to go up, but their CyberArk's stock rating or whatever was downgraded after the announcement, and both traded lower. So, stock markets are finicky. But anyways, I thought this was pretty big news because these are big names in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge announcement. There was some chatter in some of my various chats of cybersecurity professionals where it sounded like Palo had just discovered that identity is important to a security strategy. And again, it's folks who work for Microsoft being a little dismissive of it, but there is an element of truth to that, right? Like in humor is usually truth. And this is a good announcement. Andy, you and I believe very strongly that the future of cybersecurity is in a platform approach. The buy a bunch of different solutions and stitch them together yourself strategy, I think, has been a proven failure at this point, and I've been on the record on this show as saying that. And so I appreciate, although in my day job I compete very strongly with Palo, I appreciate that they also see the value of platform and they are heading that direction, because I do believe eventually everyone will be a platform play, and you'll kind of pick your, you'll get the sorting hat and it'll pick your house, whether it's Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw or whatever. It'll be kind of like that in the future. And I think overall that's a good thing. I think that's the best way to approach cybersecurity. I don't think making every shop its own systems integrator is a correct approach. So supportive of this. I agree with your analysis. CyberArk, although very good at what they do, has for the most part occupied this somewhat niche of kind of, you described it as legacy, and let's just leave it at that. So very interesting in the cybersecurity tooling landscape, very interesting because I do recognize Palo as an absolute leader in this space, a very strong, very tough competitor, and this is only making their platform better. And so I think that's super, super interesting and something to keep an eye on. The other point I will make is that acquisitions are hard. We have some scar tissue from this here at Microsoft. In fact, we'll address a little bit of this later in the show, talking about kind of the end state of one of our acquisitions as we go through the show. But acquisitions are hard and they are not guaranteed to be successful, is my overarching point. And a lot of these vendors, especially like CrowdStrike and Palo and others, have been trying to grow through acquisitions. Cisco acquiring Splunk, Palo acquiring QRadar, right? There's been a lot of acquisitions going on lately, and they're not guaranteed success by any stretch of the imagination. And in a lot of cases, you're not acquiring them necessarily for the technology, you're acquiring them for the talent and the customer base. And then you're going to try to flip them to something else. So we'll let the jury be out on this, and we'll check back in later and see how it goes.
And we are going to roll into some Microsoft news. Adam, you alluded to it in your response, but just to mention that if you are joining us for the first time, Adam and I do work for Microsoft in our field sales, security sales unit, and we do the show on our own time. And while we do work for Microsoft, Microsoft doesn't have any editorial control over what we talk about, although we do know a lot about Microsoft, so sometimes we talk about it. And so we'll go on, and there's some really big news that was announced about Sentinel. And so
Big news.
Yeah, this is huge. And so if you remember, we had Carl on our show a few months ago where we talked about this data pyramid, right? Where you have critical data at the top, and then at the bottom, you have data that you don't care as much about. If you haven't seen that show, and I'll put it in the link in the show notes, but it is phenomenal because it kind of modernizes how you think about data going into cloud SIMs, where it wasn't as big of a deal, when you're hosting stuff on-prem and you're just worried about storage, but now you're paying a provider to put data into your SIM that's hosted in the cloud. And, the more data you put in, the more you pay. And so you have to kind of decide what data to put in there. This has been a problem for a lot of companies as they've gone with this approach of let's just dump everything into a SIM because it's not really a repository, but you do need to see stuff. There's data that's high volume and low fidelity that you'd like to keep and maybe analyze for a long tail analysis or long-term storage or retention. You might have different types of regulations. Yeah, forensics. And so how do we do that? What's a good way to do that? With the customers that I work with in the federal government, because they're on GovCloud, we've been using a different type of approach to this, which is ADX, Azure Data Explorer, which is a different level of storage. But the reason why it became relevant is because Sentinel is able to cross query now into ADX storage. And so if you understand Sentinel architecture, you use log analytics, which is an analytics tier. It's expensive to put data into, but ADX is not an analytics tier, which means that it can't alert on the data itself. The feature came out where you can cross query into ADX using Kusto from Sentinel. It became a good solution because it's cheaper to store data in ADX. Now, that takes significant engineering and architecture to get that done. And what was announced is essentially a replacement type of architecture for that natively built into Sentinel called Sentinel Data Lake. And so this is a huge step in addressing where should I put data that is long-term storage or high volume, low fidelity, but I still want to do different types of analysis on it. And what's kind of better about this versus the ADX solution, although the ADX solution still works, it's not going away, but this is natively built in to Sentinel. And so the experience is super smooth. It's really easy. It doesn't take a lot of engineering effort to do that. So you're able to store that data and then run different types of analytics on a single copy of that data. Everything's going to be built in natively with all of your Sentinel connectors that you have, and it'll support the existing table schemas, and you can create custom connectors and bring in additional raw data into the data lake, or you can transform it at ingestion as well. And there's a new table management. And so if you remember, before this came out, table management, you used to have to actually go into log analytics. So you have to go outside of Sentinel, you have to go into Azure because the data is stored in Azure. And within log analytics, you can then look at the different tables, the individual tables of data, and you could select different retention on a specific table. So let's say non-interactive sign-in failures. There could be a lot of those, and that oftentimes is one of the highest data generating tables within log analytics. You could set that to say, a shorter period of time to save a little bit of money. But now that table management is natively built into the Defender XDR portal. There's a little new tab that says table management, and then you'll be able to select those tables and not only select retention, but also, do you want to send directly to the data lake or do you want to send it to the analytics tier? Just little 2 radio buttons that you can click and pick which tables that you want to do. And you can do that at the connector level too. So if you have a connector, it'll show you which tables are associated with it. And then from there, you can pick whether it goes to the data lake or to the analytics tier. And this is all in public preview today, so you can go and enable it. It's really easy. There's a banner across that you just click and you can enable it. And at this time, you can only send it to either the analytics or the data lake. However, if you send it to the analytics tier, it also gives a copy at no additional cost to the data lake tier. So it's just going to copy over that data so that you have it in the data lake for long-term storage if you want, if you're sending it to the analytics tier. And so what can you do with this data in the data lake? You can run like jobs is one example. So you can obviously query it with Custo query straight from advanced hunting. That's a no-brainer, right? So that's built in automatically. You can query from advanced hunting in the Defender XDR portal and query this data just like you would with anything in the analytics tier. You can also create these scheduled jobs that will do aggregate all the data that you have within the data lake and kind of analyze it and see if there are any anomalies. And it's usually just a Custo query. You can schedule it and run it. And then based on those insights, you can then elevate it if you want to the analytics here and alert on it. If you want to say, okay, well, this job is running. I see some stuff here. I would like to get alerted when this happens. You can then elevate that data to the data lake or to the analytics tier, create an alert for it, and be alerted on it. There's also a new Visual Studio Code extension that enables the security teams to connect to the data lake and use Python notebooks as well as Spark and machine learning libraries to do some deep analysis. And so all you need to do is install that Visual Studio extension, and you can use AI coding agents like GitHub Copilot to build a notebook and then execute it in the managed environment. And these notebooks can then also be scheduled as jobs, and the resulting insights, again, can be elevated if you want to that analytics tier for additional threat investigation and response. So the article that talked about this gave a final kind of like, let's put it all together and show how this works. And so I'm just going to kind of read that because this is how it can be kind of operationalized from a customer aspect. So like, for example, network logs, they're typically high volume logs, but they can contain some key insights for detecting that initial point of attack, command and control connections, lateral movement, any exfiltration attempts. And so now you can send these high volume logs to the data lake tier, and you can create a Python notebook that will then join the latest threat intelligence from Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence Network, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes here. And then you can use that to scan the network logs for any connections to and from suspicious IPs or domains. You can schedule this notebook to run as a scheduled job, and then any insights can then be promoted to the analytics tier, and then you can leverage and enrich ongoing investigations, hunt, responses, forensics. And all this is possible with cost-effective data because you're not having to set up any complex infrastructure, and you can get that deeper insight without a ton of work. And so really cool stuff. It's in public preview. So it should be rolling out to your tenants now. And if you're a Sentinel customer or you're using it or you're thinking about it, again, there's going to be a banner there. You can just click through it and enable the data lake tier, and you're off to the races.
I had a customer share my screen yesterday. We're recording this Saturday, August 2nd at 8:30 in the morning. As Andy reminded me, it's early for him. But yesterday, Friday, late in the day, I was talking to a customer. They shared their screen. It had the banner for Sentinel Data Lake right on it, big and visible. So obviously, this is something we're trying to make sure customers know about. And then Andy and I are talking about it because it's technically interesting. Taking the Azure Data Lake service that is very tried and true, demonstrated, capable of handling extremely demanding scenarios, And extending it into a security scenario makes a ton of sense. The technology is all there. It's kind of stitching it together is what has happened here. And it's really exciting. Now, you can go poke at this today. Anybody listening should have this in your tenant. Again, public preview. So would not start putting a whole bunch of production data and production security practices in here yet, but at least kick the tires on it. Check it out. This does effectively replace both basic logs and auxiliary logs. Auxiliary logs are never going to come to general availability. They were in public preview. This kind of replaces them. So as auxiliary logs were in public preview, and this happens sometimes with public previews, we realize there's a better way, and it never gets promoted to general availability. So this is an example of that happening. Basic logs will exist still in the log analytics world, but for Sentinel users, effectively, Andy laid it out, it becomes pretty much a binary choice. Either it's analytics logs or it goes in the data lake. I'm simplifying slightly, but that's more or less what you have to decide today. Now, the pricing on this is broken apart a little bit, and that's by design, to where if you're just wanting to use this more for long-term storage and retention, that can be more cost effective than if you're wanting to do a little more with it. Like Andy talked about, some of these opportunities to run scheduled jobs against it and query it. There can be some additional costs associated with that. But the idea is you're only paying for what you use. And so with more complex billing models or breaking things apart, also comes better opportunities for customers to dial in the pricing to exactly what you use. I'll give you an example, maybe to simplify it a bit. If you go back to before John Ledger got hired at T-Mobile, and T-Mobile really kind of started shaking up the cellular game, you used to pay a flat monthly cost for your cell phone. And you didn't have like a broken out segment on what was your effective payment for your hardware. Because remember, you had the 2-year contract, and they would give you a phone at a discounted rate that the phone company was still paying for most of your phone. And then you were effectively paying it back as part of your service cost, but it was opaque. Your service cost and what you were doing to repay your hardware costs were all bundled in one price. And what T-Mobile really did, it's not so much they lowered prices, although they did some of that too. They broke that apart. They made it so that it was transparent on here's what I'm paying to pay for my hardware. And that's where we today have these kind of financing plans through the phone company. And then here's what I'm paying for service. So now if your phone is paid off, yes, your bill goes down. If you buy your phone outright, your bill goes down. In the old days, I used to remind people, if you're out of contract, you are throwing away money, because baked in that one opaque monthly cost was the stipend for your hardware as well as your service cost. So the most effective way to work with the phone companies in that era was you should always be under contract. Otherwise, you're leaving money on the table. So with this model, kind of same idea. Instead of it being this all-in-one, all-you-can-eat package, which may be costing you more than is necessary, but sure, maybe gives you more cost certainty, which I'm not dismissive of. I know budgeting is important in corporate America, but in this scenario, you now pay for only what you're using, and you actually have more transparency over where your spend is going. Is that going for storage? Is it going for compute? Is it going for processing and analytics? So it's a little bit of a different model. Don't jump out of your skin when you first see kind of the pricing model for this here. As you unpack it and understand it, and you, of course, can reach out to your Microsoft account team for more information. We'll help you understand it and make sense of it and have a sense of what a monthly spend might look like. But it's actually, in my mind, a good thing. And Andy alluded to this a little bit, that it's by design so that depending on what your needs are for the data lake, you're only paying for that portion of it. Because for some organizations, they just need this big honking data lake where they can dump stuff and keep it forever or for a really long time because they have extremely strong compliance and regulatory needs. And some organizations just want to dump high volume logs in a lower cost tier and then run analytics as needed on them. Those are kind of two different things, whether it's I need to store this forever versus it's high volume and I do want to analyze it, but I don't need alerting generated on it, as an example. So trying to kind of thread the needle and meet everyone's needs all in one solution. And it's the kind of solution that's flexible enough to do that. And I think that's the most exciting part, is whatever you need out of your longer term, higher volume retention tier now in your security SIM solution, you have options to accomplish that now. So again, pretty exciting, more to come, public preview today. Kick the tires, check it out, read the doc, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this in the future.
Yeah, and then one final note too. This week I actually logged into our demo environment, which has a lot of the private preview stuff, and I was taking a look at this data lake, and I actually noticed that the Azure Sentinel portal is already starting to be deprecated. There were tabs within the Azure portal that I clicked on, and it was like, hey, all this has been moved to the Defender portal, the Defender XDR. If you haven't started that journey and started using the Defender portal, which has everything in it, it has if you're using Defender for Office, Defender for Endpoint, and it aggregates all of those signals together, including Sentinel. That move has been over a year now, where the Sentinel tab has been included and things have been moving over. Now we're actually seeing that Azure portal starting to deprecate on the commercial side. Federal still has it, of course, and government still has it because government moves a little slower in the Gov Cloud. But on the commercial side, you will start seeing that Azure portal getting deprecated.
That's a good call out. We had not touched on that news on this show, but yes, just to reiterate what Andy's saying, the Azure Sentinel portal is being deprecated. I think there's a full year yet before full deprecation, but you should start making the move to the Defender portal. And then just a slight renaming note, not an aggressive one. We had for about the last year or so referred to the Defender portal as our unified SecOps experience or unified SecOps portal. That naming is supposed to kind of go away. We're supposed to stop saying that so much. And then Andy, you've dropped it multiple times on this show, but technically they just want to call it the Microsoft Defender portal now, which good luck with that, because when I hear Defender without an explainer behind it, I find it ambiguous, but I am not in marketing and neither is Andy. So there you go. So the Microsoft Defender portal will be your home for Sentinel, all the XDR solutions like endpoint identity, Office, cloud apps, as well as all the CNAP information from Defender for Cloud, as well as now some select purview alerts. So things like data loss prevention and insider risk management also flow in that portal. So truly, for the people who have been banging the drum on, I need a one pane of glass, we have delivered that, and it is in the Defender portal today. And it's honestly a pretty amazing engineering effort. What has been done, a pretty heroic engineering effort, and really, really proud of that, because man, did I get tired of hearing single pane of glass, and now I have it. And it feels like, well, we've always had it, and that's not true at all. It was a lot of work to get there, but pretty cool stuff.
All right, so we're going to end on some other great news.
Mm-hmm.
Defender threat intelligence, which we mentioned in our previous segment here on Sentinel, is actually converging into Sentinel and Defender XDR. What does that mean? So Defender threat intelligence is a solution that you used to have to purchase because it was an acquisition, as we talked about acquisitions in the beginning of the show.
Acquisitions are hard.
Something called Risk IQ. And so they were a threat intelligence leader in the space. They actually came with multiple different solutions. One of them was their threat intelligence, API, their threat intelligence service, as well as external attack surface management, which is like a Shodan type service where you can look at your external domains and all that. And so the Defender threat intelligence portion that we used to sell for a significant amount of money,
mm-hmm.
Is now getting just integrated into Sentinel and Defender XDR at no additional cost. And so essentially the service that you used to have to purchase is now included for free. I don't like to use the term for free, but if you're a customer and you're using Defender XDR and Sentinel, it's just going to be included now. Right.
And just to give you some context, Andy mentioned paid solution. I won't name an exact price on the air so I don't get my hand slapped, but let's just say multiple thousands per seat per month is how much that cost. So significant, and I mean significant additional value being included at no additional cost.
Yeah. And so you're going to get all of the repositories to the raw and finished intelligence from 84 trillion signals over and backed by over about 10,000 security professionals at Microsoft. And so it's going to take place over the next several months and hopefully get completed within the first half of next year. But a few things have already been done. First off, finished threat intelligence. So Defender XDR customers will have access to the comprehensive threat intelligence library via the threat reports and threat analytics. This includes the exclusive analysis of threat activity, the detailed content focused on threat actors, threat toolings, vulnerabilities found in Intel profiles. So there's an Intel profile tab that used to be only available for what we used to call the threat intelligence premium customers, but that's now going to be included. So it's just going to pop up and you can look at those threat profiles of different threat actors and kind of understand what's out there. And it's massive. So if you see something in the news, you're like, who is this? Someone mentions Cozy Bear or, whatever acronym, Blizzard something, you can just go right into
Midnight Blizzard,
yeah, you can just go right into the threat profile, look them up.
Volt Typhoon.
There's all sorts of data in there. And also you can connect that intelligence to any of your related incidents that you have generated, any vulnerabilities that you have in your environment for endpoints, and also like any recommended actions that you might want to take to defend yourself against these threat profiles. Also, IOCs and case management is already integrated. So Sentinel customers will be able to share threat actor IOCs, indicators of compromise, via a Sentinel case management to collaborate and share threat research across the teams within their organization. So this will streamline sharing as well as enhancing cross-team collaboration, and it accelerates the identification and contamination of threats as new intelligence is discovered. And so by leveraging this workflow within Sentinel, you can then ensure that actionable threat indicators are promptly distributed and integrated into ongoing investigations. So that is also pretty cool. And then if you are, I before the show, as I was asking Adam if he had any existing Defender threat intelligence customers, if you are a threat intelligence customer with Microsoft, you're going to have access to that full experience until the product is retired next August. So it's going to be retired August 1, 2026. But you should be contacted by your account team with some guidance on how to transition that into the unified threat intelligence experience within the Defender XDR portal. So, and it'll be, again, at no additional cost. So we're essentially, the word that Microsoft is using is we're democratizing threat intelligence.
That's a very Microsoft way of putting it.
Yeah, exactly. I think, like just to kind of muse on this, as Adam and I are in the field, we see what kind of sells and what doesn't. And in my whole time in the field, I only had one customer purchase Defender Threat Intelligence, and that was mainly because they used to be a Risk IQ customer. So they were actually a legacy Risk IQ customer that then transitioned to Defender Threat Intelligence because it was acquired, and there was like a certain agreed upon pricing for existing Risk IQ customers to kind of pay that existing price for like a year or something like that, and then they had to transition to the new pricing, which was a lot more. It was something, and we see this a lot where like maybe something isn't selling well, and so we're just going to include it because we're not going to toss it out. It's great value, but we're just going to include it. I see this also in like the Defender CSPM solution, where we used to have a Defender for DevOps, but not many people turned that on. So we're just going to include that into the Defender CSPM. External attack surface management is another example where there's not a lot of customers who are buying that separately. And so a lot of those initial signals, not all of it, there's still value in people buying that solution, but some of that's been implemented into CSPM. Same thing with that Entra permissions management too, right?
CloudKnox, yeah.
CloudKnox acquisitions. These are all acquisitions that we've had where they have a standalone solution. We're like, okay, we'll rebrand it and sell it. And then through time, we've kind of integrated some of those capabilities into an existing solution like Defender CSPM. And, we just give it as a package value. Microsoft's very good at just packaging things and saying, hey, you get all the things, right? Like maybe you don't want all the things, but you're getting it as a great value in this low price for a package, right?
That is why I said acquisitions are hard. We have the scar tissue to prove it over some time now. And some of them work out. Adelom, the Defender for Cloud Apps acquisition, has gone pretty well. Secure Islands, which became Azure Information Protection and now Purview Information Protection, very successful acquisition. And then crazy thing about Risk IQ is we got a ton of great talent. Today, in my current team, I have a security solution engineer who came from Risk IQ. I have an Azure security solution engineer who came from Risk IQ. So I am surrounded by Risk IQ folks day to day, but in terms of selling their product standalone, a lot of that didn't work out. In fact, Andy, external attack surface management is now the sole survivor. So give them the $1 million, get them off the island. They did it. But when we were talking about Palo at the top of the show, and I wasn't trying to be intentionally skeptical, I was just pointing out that acquisitions have traditionally been hard. And you can look at other cybersecurity vendors on the challenges of this. And sometimes the acquisitions are not driven on, we're going to take this product and keep selling it forever. Sometimes it is more on, we want access to the customer base. We want access to the talent. We're going to roll this into an existing solution and kind of just bake it in as a baseline capability. And it kind of makes sense. Like, threat intelligence is way more useful when it's baked into every layer of the security operations stack. As you are going through it, it shouldn't be this additional like sprinkles on top of the ice cream sundae. It should be layered throughout. It should be like your chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream where you got a bite in every bite kind of thing. That's how threat intelligence should work. And so I think this is a really positive development on driving the state of threat intelligence forward in our industry, that it shouldn't be an add-on. It shouldn't be a nice to have. It should be a need to have, and everyone should bake it in. And to be honest, this really plays to our employers' strengths. One of Microsoft's unique strengths that we've beat our chest on forever is the volume of telemetry and signal we bring in. The number now is 84 trillion signals per day, which is just incredible. Microsoft Security Research Center and all the different folks we have, Digital Crimes Unit, protecting customers, protecting the world, 10,000 of them is pretty incredible. And so now customers are going to benefit from all that even more than they already did. I just think that's good for the industry. I think as listeners of the show, you may not care if necessarily one vendor does something, but if that, and I'm going to bust out an atomism here, the rising tide that lifts all ships, this is now something that other vendors have to respond to. So will we see CrowdStrike? Will we see Palo? Will we see the other players start to bake threat intelligence in instead of making it an add-on or tell you to go talk to Recorded Future or whomever? That's good for all of us. Every single person listening to this show would benefit from that. So I see this as a shot across the bow of the industry, saying threat intelligence should be built in, not bolted on. And I think that's a huge win. So I'm excited about that. Obviously, personally, and how it affects my day job, yeah, I'm excited about that too. But I'm always excited about the rising tide lifting all ships. And if it's my employer doing it, great. If it's someone else doing it, also great. I talked at the top of the show that I'm thrilled Palo is committed to the platform play, because I think that's the future of cybersecurity. And I'm glad they're in the boat with us. The good boat platform security, there's at least two players in it. It's Microsoft and Palo, and some other folks are trying to climb aboard, and good for them, because again, I am so dismissive of the idea that every single enterprise should be expert level systems integrators stitching a bunch of disparate solutions together. That makes no sense to me. I don't agree with that approach at all. So I always end the show kind of on a positive note, or at least try. And what I'm excited about this is the diffusion effect across our industry and how it can benefit everyone. But if you're a Microsoft customer, it especially will benefit you in the short term. So cool stuff.
And that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching and listening. As always, the links to the things that we talked about will be in the show notes. Definitely check that out. I'm going to include a bunch of great links and information if you're interested about learning more and reading about the things that we talked about. And our contact information will be in the show notes as well if you have any questions or topics you want us to talk about in the future. Thanks. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Security Podcast. Please check out the show notes, catch up on episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Andy on Twitter @AJaw0 and Adam @AJ Brewer. See you at our next episode.